Good evening. I'd like to call the village board meeting for the Village of Cary for Tuesday, May 19th, 2020 to order with roll call, please.
McAlpine?
Here.
Collier?
Here.
Betts?
Here.
Attending via telephone or Zoom, Jake? Weinhammer? Gross? Did you call them?
We have to
Oh,
vote to allow them to participate.
all right. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I will entertain a motion to allow trustees Weinhammer, Kraus, and Cavelli to attend the meeting via teleconference.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Welcome, Jennifer, Jeff. Kim, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now move to the open forum where the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. I've had nobody sign in. There's 2 visitors in the boardroom. We know why they're here, so they will discuss this when their item comes up. Other than that, we'll close open forum at 6:02. Under the mayor's report, I'll give a brief COVID-19. I still continue to participate in all the many conference calls, Zoom calls, personal meetings about COVID-19. As everybody is aware, McHenry County has petitioned the governor to advance our phase status to phase 3 and then phase 4. We petitioned him last week. We still have not heard anything back from his office as of today. In my conference call with the governor this afternoon, he indicated that all of the regions are trending towards entering into phase 3, which means that we are probably, McHenry County is entering into phase 4. We're substantially ahead of the curve there. So we will continue to work on getting our county and our village open safely, healthy, and so that our businesses could resume their work. So if anybody has any questions about any of the calls and the meetings that I have, please reach out. I'd be happy to go over that. Trustees report, none have been brought to my attention, so we'll get on with regular business now. I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items number 1 through 8 as shown on the village's website and is displayed on the video monitor during the village board meeting.
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Betts?
Yes.
Collier?
Yes.
Cavelli?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
McAlpine?
Yes.
Weinhammer?
Thank you. Moving to items for separate action, I will entertain a motion to approve a resolution 1, rejecting all bids, 2, waiving the competitive bidding requirements with advertising, and 3, awarding the well number 10 replacement project to the next lowest and most responsible and responsive bidder, Path Construction Company, Arlington Heights, Illinois, in the amount not to exceed $2,287,000, and authorize the village administrator to approve a 10% contingency for unforeseen changes in scope for a maximum project budget of $2,515,700.
So moved. Second.
Is Eric on? Eric,
Yes, I am, Mayor.
did you want to kind of touch base why we are at this stage of that bidding process, please?
Certainly. So with the request for bids that was issued for our well 10 project, so this, as the board may recall from our CIPs discussions and our board budget presentations, this is for the replacement and reconstruction of the drinking water treatment facility and the well house facility over at well 10, which is in the Fox Trail subdivision. The project was issued for bid per our standard policies and procedures, and upon opening the bids on May 7th, they were read aloud, and the apparent low bidder at the time was Larson & Larson. Immediately following the bid opening, Larson & Larson did submit to us a letter requesting to withdraw their bid indicating an error, a substantial error in their bid costs on their end, with a magnitude of, significant magnitude of over $100,000. Given that, the village and the consultant reviewed the proposals and then received a subsequent contractor stating that they wish to retract their initial withdrawal. So given that, they were now the new apparent low bidder. However, in discussions with the consultant and with our village attorney, staff does have some concerns utilizing this bid, given that there is an acknowledged significant error in the bid, which does obviously affect their likely profit margins. And then the concerns with the coordination moving forward on a contractor that it already has some reduced abilities for profit, and then the issues that they may that may entail moving forward. So given that, it was recommended that the process be utilized to waive the reject all bids, waive the competitive bid requirements, and then utilize the ability to negotiate with the next lowest bidder in that process, which was Path Construction. Their bid is still within and below the budget amount, and the consultant has reviewed their qualifications and has found that their past and other experience in the projects of similar or greater magnitude makes them qualified for the work, and we do recommend their approval.
Thank you, Eric. Does any trustees have any questions for Eric regarding this? Thank you for looking out for the best interest of the village here. Roll call, please.
Collier,
Yes.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
and Betts.
Yes.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve a resolution authorizing the village administrator to execute a construction engineering agreement with Strand Associates Incorporated, Joliet, Illinois, in the amount not to exceed $205,250 for construction inspection services associated with well 10 treatment system replacement, and authorize the village administrator to approve a 10% contingency for unforeseen changes in the scope for a maximum project budget of $225,775.
So moved. Second.
Eric, do you have anything you want to add to this?
No, Mayor, this is just the construction services associated with the inspection and review of the progress for the work on that same well 10 project. Strand was the design engineer for the project, so they do have an intimate knowledge of the details with regards to the work, and they are the most qualified for that process.
Thank you. Any questions from the village board?
No.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Cavelli,
Yes.
Kraus,
Yes.
McAlpine,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Yes.
Betts,
Yes.
and Collier.
Yes.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion to approve a waiver of certain application requirements for the planned development application related to the development of the Sulky property.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Brian, did you want to take this, please?
Sure, certainly. The item up for consideration this evening is a request from Extreme Clean Car Wash. They're looking to develop on the Selkie property, a portion of the site next to the proposed planned Thornton's Oil service station. As the board will recall, under the village's plan development regulations, the process requires a pre-development meeting such as this, or for any waivers of any application requirements that may be required under the PUD ordinance. In this case, the petitioner is proposing or seeking a waiver of a few items related to the project, which are summarized in their staff or their letter and also in the staff report. Specifically, they're asking for a waiver of the open house resident meeting, the preliminary meeting. Staff is supportive of that request, as the subject site is really not next to any additional or existing residential areas. That if a meeting were to be held, there would not be significant individuals that would be notified of that. And also during the current restrictions on gatherings. Staff would recommend that be waived for this particular project, but obviously they still would be performing the necessary public hearing process through the zoning board as the next phase. Also, they're requesting a waiver of the offsite utility improvement plan, as there are no offsite requirement or proposals or utilities proposed as part of this project. They all would be performed on the property, so that would not be a necessary requirement for this particular project. They're also requesting a waiver of various studies that the plan development ordinance requires, specifically a traffic study, economic analysis study, and environmental impact studies. The subject site, as the board is aware, has previously been utilized for industrial uses. It was cleaned and regraded to make way for commercial development. The adjacent roadway network has been improved or is under the jurisdiction of IDOT that has regulatory control over access points and the amount of where vehicle traffic can travel. So the traffic study staff felt was not required for this project, as IDOT has already reviewed the locations of those entrances to the site and is generally supportive of those locations in certain conditions. Likewise, with the impact study, the environmental impact study, with the site being cleaned or regraded from industrial use in the past, there are no existing protected areas on the property as far as wetlands or floodways on the site that would require an environmental impact study to be provided. The development would still need to conform to all development requirements going forward as far as McHenry County stormwater ordinances and pre-treatment methods for collection of oil or various contaminants from the car wash facility before it would enter the sanitary sewer system, such as a grease and water separator in the or triple catch basin on the property would be required as part of the development plans for this particular use. As a result of staff's review of the application requests, staff would be in support of the requested waivers. The project would still, if approved, those waivers this evening, would still need to go through the public hearing process for zoning hearing before the zoning board in June, and then would be back for final consideration of the PUD and proposed conditional use for the car wash facility back to the village board following that hearing.
Thank you, Brian. I also have Dave Miller, who wanted to discuss this with the village board. Also, I believe that the petitioner is on the line as well, or on Zoom, from Extreme Car Wash.
Yes, the petitioner is also on the call.
Could you just state your name for our record, please?
Dan, would you like to provide any additional information regarding the proposed use?
Actually, I appreciate you guys considering this waiver, and in regards to that triple basin, we put those on all of our facilities. They actually filter any of the water that leaves our facility and goes into the sanitary. So I just wanted to, if anybody has any questions about that, happy to answer it.
Okay, you're going to have a couple of questions on that, so stay tuned. Do you want to just introduce yourself, please, for the record?
David Miller, 65 Highway 14, Perry. I have several questions. You know, it has a sensitivity of
Thanks, Justin.
David Miller, 65 Highway 14, Cary. I have several questions about what you're asking to be waived. You talk about it's not a sensitivity area, yet right at the edge of the property it says leaving water supply protection area. So it is a water source. I'm looking, it says there's no neighbors, residential neighbors, which I would hope you would consider me as a neighbor, as a business that's recreational, commercial recreational, which people come for for a nice and peaceful area to it. So I'd like to know what kind of noise it would generate. I think it should be more transparency that show before it goes to zoning board what you do for chemicals. I believe it's a better spot for a car wash than the last one presented, but I still have concerns about anything gets into the stormwater or can cross Route 14 into my very sensitive ecological property. There's, environmental is a very sensitive thing to it. And even your signs on 14 say it's a water supply protection area. So I believe it should have more transparency before it goes to zoning to let the public know what's going on. And I think if they could prove themselves right, go along with it, but I don't want to see it fast-tracked. That's what it seems like it's going to be fast-tracked without letting everybody else have a word into it.
And just for the record too, Mr. Miller provided the board, we will scan this and send it to the other members. This, just a picture of one of our highway signs. It says leaving water supply protection area.
Which is just to the south of the property. You know, that sign is right there by Kitchen Wholesaler.
Right by Kitchen Wholesalers, yes. It's at the far end of that property. Could you go ahead and answer some of Mr. Miller's concerns, please?
Yeah, so I would like to address a few of those. In regards to the noise, we have designed our facilities to allow all of our equipment, our vacuums, our motors, everything is inside of our building. In addition to that, we've included a fast track speed door at the entrance and exit that goes down upon exiting the car wash. At that point, that door goes back down and waits for the next car to exit the car wash or enter the car wash. The way we design our buildings, we hide all of our mechanicals on our roof so that they're screened, and all that noise from those goes up versus out, so that's your rooftop units, your air conditioners, stuff of that nature, so you don't hear any of that. But as far as our car wash equipment, everything that pertains to the actual car wash equipment itself is in our back room, and it's piped underground to the outside vacuum handles. We've put our vending machines to the inside of the building in a special room, because a lot of the vending machines have beeping that goes on if they run out of product. So those are in our back room as well, or in a special vending room. In regards to the waterway, so when you enter our facility, we put on a soap on no car, no acid, nothing that's hazardous to any of the waterways. It's all biodegradable chemicals, and that stuff is rinsed off the car prior to it getting to the 60% mark in the tunnel. So as it gets 60% through the tunnel, all the soaps and everything that is applied to the car, waxes and soaps, are rinsed off the car. They go into a catch drain that is the entire length of the tunnel, which is about 6 feet deep, 4 or 5 feet wide, and that drains into a triple basin. That first triple basin fills up with water. Any dirt or contaminants that were on the car that are washed off the car go into that first triple basin. The second triple basin will then fill up over time, and it'll filter out the contaminants into the second tank. And by the time it leaves the third tank, the water is essentially clear. And it's by the time it gets to the third tank, if we were to use it as recaptured water to reclaim it, it would be ready to go. There would be no dirt or sludge in anything, in any of that water. So one of the other things that we do at the exit of our car wash is we put a drainage grate in there to catch any of the rinse water, which is, there's no chemicals added to the rinse water, but it allows any water that might be coming and dripping off the car to go into this trench drain at the exit of our tunnel, so it's not carried out onto any main streets. In addition to that, the way our building is oriented on the property, the drive is not pulling right out onto Route 14. We're actually going left or right into a shared driveway, allowing that car, if it is going to drip dry, if there is any water left, it would drip dry prior to leaving and going onto State Road 14. But we have a dryer system at our car wash that gets to 120 degrees at the exit end of the car wash. So essentially, when that car leaves the car wash, it's 98% dry. So I hope that addressed your concerns. I can tell you that we don't use any products that are hazardous to to the environment. We don't use acid on any products. We are not a type of car wash that needs to use acid. We scrub the rims as it's going through versus spraying it. If you go to like a touchless car wash, that is all acid products that is on the car. That's how it eats the dirt away. We do not use that. I can tell you that we're definitely a safer product than any other car wash, as well as, in relation to a gas station. So if looking at that from that perspective.
Mr. Miller, did you have any
Yeah,
follow-up
the
questions?
biodegradables that I've heard with car washes, going through the last bit we went through, because they say biodegradable and everything else doesn't mean it's not harmful to fish. I'd just like to see more public input to this, to know more about it before it goes to zoning. I think it has all great merit, but I'd like to see what a grading plan is. I'd like to see a little more to it before it goes to zoning, so that there are concerns when you bring it to zoning before it feels like being fast-tracked through. I'd like to see a little more, another meeting with the public. I understand you don't need to have some of the things you're asking to be waived. I understand, it makes a lot of sense. The utilities are being put in by someone else, but I think you're trying to push something through faster than what I'd like to see. More people know, more knowledge, what kind of chemicals. Going through the last series of car washing to it, I've learned a lot more that makes me more worried about what kind of chemicals to use, because they say it's biodegradable. It doesn't make it, makes it non-harmful to humans, but fish are much more delicate, and I have a very delicate aquifer across the street. So I'd like to see how the grading's going. It should appear to all run the other direction, should all appear to go to the west, but the pictures I see don't show any topals or anything else all to it, so I'd like to see a little more public input, and before it goes to zoning, that's the only thing I'm asking for.
And also, in addition to what I said before, the detention pond, that it actually doesn't matter to us because our chemicals or any of our soaps that go into our car wash go in through the sanitary, they don't go through the storm.
Correct.
But any rainwater that's coming from our site is shedding to the detention pond in the rear. So we've addressed that by using the shared detention pond that's being relocated or put in.
But like I said, the stuff on the website showing what you're proposing isn't very detailed, showing elevations. You're trying to fast track it past that. I understand that time is essence on any business. I'm a business person also. I just like to see a little more detailed drawings so the village board really knows what you're doing. And other than this, the zoning board and Brian being in charge of it.
Mayor, if I can address that, just additional knowledge, the information that's in the packet is very preliminary. It's just the site plan and then the overall PUD plan that was approved by the village board earlier this year for the 5-lot subdivision. The petitioner certainly will give additional development plans that include preliminary engineering, landscaping, building elevations, and additional documentation will be submitted as part of the zoning petition, which will go through the zoning process. So there will be additional information provided. This request this evening is simply to request specific waivers to the application requirements that would be submitted as part of that petition. The full submittal is not required at this point per our ordinance, but certainly through the public hearing process, those documents will be required to be submitted and will be made available to the public for viewing and review, so that the questions that are being discussed here would be vetted in full detail throughout the zoning process.
I just feel it'd be better for the whole board to see it, those things. It's hard for everybody to get time to do it. That I don't think it's a bad idea to have the board see these things before it goes to zoning, so they could put their input to it also. I think more eyes on this, the better. I think it's as a community, everybody's very well wants to make sure it looks good for the village coming in. And I also think it's a shame that we're using frontage again. We're losing sales tax, and what I think could be put behind the Thorntons, more to the other side to it, but it is what it is. It's not my property to buy or sell. But I would just like to see more transparency and more input from the village board so they can see more of what it really looks like, other than just the zoning guys get to see, and you see it afterwards. I think it'd be nice for the zoning to know what the finished product is, and not the board have to make another decision on it later. I just think I think it deserves another meeting, another open meeting. If you have everything else waiver to it, but at the open meeting, so because who knows what people on Ross Street feel. They do have residential that's only 200 feet away up on Ross Street and everything else, and they're more elevated, they'd hear the noise more than I would down below. And I don't believe anybody really knows what's going on unless, not many people watch what's happening with the village until after it's done. So I'd like to see some community input. So I
Thank
wish
you
the
for your
village
comment.
would let that happen, that's all.
We understand your concerns.
Okay.
Before I make any comments on this, anybody from the village board have any comments regarding this? Any questions for the petitioner? Any comments for our staff regarding this project?
I do. I have two questions. One is there a location that we could go to see the actual or hear the actual sounds that this car wash would make in the area?
Yeah, I have a location in East Dundee on Route 25.
On Route 25, okay. And what is it called?
It's Extreme Clean Car Wash. It's at 25 and Penny Road next to the Thornton's gas station there.
We can get everybody the address and the location information too.
102 Dundee Avenue.
And then my second question is, the lot, does it have to be on 14? Could it be on this, on back of the Thorntons?
It would need for us to be a successful business in any community. We would never want to be behind anything. Therefore, if we weren't next to it, it would not work for us. No. So it is. We've worked together with gas station companies, Thornton particularly, and we're a great neighbor for them. It's a complementary business together. I can tell you that when we opened our East Dundee location, their sales rose by 21% because it creates a destination location, and it worked well. And we've carried that same plan at multiple locations. We have a site in South Holland, Illinois. We bought a Ford dealership and we tore it down, and I sold part of the property to Thorntons. So it works well when we're next to it. It just wouldn't work behind it. So to answer your question, no. And then in regards to visiting our East Dundee location, please keep in mind, if any of you do visit it, that location is about 10 years old, and our vacuums are actually outside in a trash controlled area, trash enclosure area. The newer buildings that we have, which is in St. Charles, and that all of our equipment for those locations is on the interior of the building.
That makes sense.
I just want to remind the board too that we certainly will have time to discuss the actual use of the property. This, similar to other processes, this has to go through the zoning board. At that time, there will be discussion about the actual use, and it will come back to the village board too for further discussion about that. This is the preliminary process about just, do we want to waive these items that are being requested by the petitioner?
I have another question. Did you want name it?
Thank you. Christina Anderson, 65 Highway 14 in Cary. I agree. I like that idea. It's not my property to buy, sell, or whatever, but Carbath is behind Thornton's and they are always packed. This is prime real estate as far as we all go, but that's not what we're here for. The letter that was put on there where it says culturally, this proposed site is not a known culturally or environmentally sensitive area. My dad showed you guys that it in fact is. I don't think that these things should be waived. There's no reason why we don't do a study. I mean, it's not that if it goes, if they say it's fine, then great, it's fine. I think we should cross our T's and dot our I's. The lack of residents in immediate project area, I also don't agree with because there is that subdivision right above. One resident is just as good as 10 to get their input in as far as giving I think they wanted to waive the open house. Is that what it was? I don't have the minutes on me.
Yes.
It's just an opinion that I have. I'm 100% behind putting business here. I just feel like we should cross our T's and dot our I's as far as environmental impact, sound, all that kind of stuff, open house. those things are put in place for a reason. I just feel like we should just go through with it, and if everything comes out great, then let's bring them in. I'll be the first one in the car wash, you know? So that's just it's not a question, it's just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Brian, let's talk a little bit more about the environmental impact studies. If that was something that we were to require prior to this, what would that look like?
Certainly, generally, an environmental impact study would look at what type of existing conditions are on the property, whether there be wetlands or floodways that would potentially be impacted by development, or looking at what type of development may have already occurred on the property before, if the property was remediated from any particular use that was there prior to the development site, whether it be an industrial use from a brownfields or standpoint, a lush site, or some use on the property that would require additional remediation. So typically, the report would identify what actions would be required to develop the site to remediate those outstanding issues that may still occur, or any wetlands or areas that would be protected for wildlife on the site that would be necessary to be mitigated. This requirement for environmental impact study in our code reads as required by law for any studies that would need to be submitted. So there are, specifically, this would be if there was a site that on the property, if there was a heavy industrial use that was there before, prior to development for additional uses, there may need to be site cleanup or certain activities to be able to make the site available for development. That would be the type of information that we would typically look for in this type of study. And the PUD ordinance is drafted in a way that accommodates all types of development within the village, not just a commercial development such as this, but would look at potentially mixed-use development within the downtown. So it's not designed to fit, a one-size-fits-all type approach. It does allow flexibility in submittals for a petitioner, such as in this case, to request the waivers if they feel or determine that certain requirements would not be appropriate or applicable to their project. There was part of the discussion throughout the UDO process was to give more flexibility, but more openness as well, which is where this initial discussion is occurring. It does provide the opportunity for additional review of a project. There are obviously, as the individuals have mentioned that spoke, there are residents that are in the area. Certainly, if a preliminary meeting were held, these would be types of comments that would come up during that process, potentially. But certainly those are items with the density that's around the site that still could occur throughout the zoning hearing process as well. And that's the reason why staff is supportive of the waiver of the preliminary meeting, is just due to the nature of development around it. It still would notify the property owners around the property of that hearing, and then have the opportunity to provide feedback on the plan from that perspective.
Right, and that would happen at the zoning level.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, so there's still, the zoning hearing still needs to take place. Public notice will be performed where surrounding property owners would be notified of that hearing, would have an opportunity to review and comment on the plans and provide feedback in a public hearing setting. And that would be recorded against as part of the hearing process, and would be considered for review as part of the project of whether it goes forward, and what the recommendation from the ZPA would be to the village board for your eventual consideration.
Mr. Miller's got another question.
Hey, Brian, does environmental impact, does it take in consideration neighboring properties as part of environmental impact in neighboring environments?
It depends on the type of development. So certainly there are ways that as development occurs, can look at surrounding property owner or surrounding properties if there are sensitivities.
That's what I'm looking for.
One way that this could potentially be addressed is the petitioner, as part of their submittal, could provide a statement which identifies how the development, will be occurred, or demonstrate how their proposal would identify, existing natural environmental resources on the property, and then the methods that they're utilizing to perfect the physical amenities of the site. So looking at, as the petitioner's already mentioned, the ways that the site would be developed that'll treat the water prior to it entering the sanitary system, but also how the natural grading will occur so that stormwater would flow off the property. But that would be potentially something that the petitioner could provide as part of the documentation to show how the site would operate without a full-blown environmental impact study, just due to the nature of the size of the development.
So you're saying the environmental impact study would take into consideration neighboring properties, correct? That's why I'm
Brian,
worried
did
about
you
it
hear
being
that?
waived.
So the environmental study would take into consideration the neighboring property?
Yeah, it depends on what would be required from a project standpoint. So if the site were to be contributory to a neighboring property, then a impact study may include that information, where if there's a creek that runs through the subject property that goes to a neighboring property, that would be evaluated as part of a study from that perspective. But from a grading perspective, the way this site is designed, it will drain away from adjacent property, will be retained onto existing or proposed detention basins on the property, and then would then trend off site into the storm sewer system further downstream.
So
But there would not be a creek or anything on this site that would be tributary to another property that would require a full-blown impact study on.
So that's clear as mud to me. I don't understand. I mean, I'm just saying, does this one, would it have to do it or wouldn't it? Saying it's depending. I think we need to know the answer. Does this one, if we said we want an environmental impact study, is it going to incorporate the Miller's property or is it not? If it's not required, that makes a difference on how we should proceed. If it is required, that can have an impact on it. I think we need, I'm not hearing definitively whether or not it's going to do it or not. I'm hearing it depends. So my question is, depends on what? Depends on us if we just say that it has to include it? Or is anyone else confused by that, or is it just me?
No, I understand. I just would an environmental study show that for water to get to the Miller's property, which is across 5 lanes of traffic, with the grading of the property that they're building on sloping away from that. Is that something that would be identified in an environmental study, how the water would, in the event that there was a lot of water, would it flow? How it would be impacted by going over 5 lanes of traffic to get to their property, or would the water be flushed down the back part of the property where all the detention area is being built? Is that something that would be identified in a study like that?
No, what I would recommend from discussion here is I would recommend that the petitioner provide a statement or information in their submittal that identifies how they will treat or respond to the natural environmental conditions that exist in the area, so that it can describe how they're protecting adjacent property, and the petitioner's already provided that information, some of that information this evening, but that could be additional information that can be submitted as part of their petition. It's not a environmental impact study that would not be necessary for this type of project, but that could be additional information that could be provided just to support how this site will take into consideration some of the concerns that are brought up this evening.
Attorney,
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
this is Dan Gutsy. I just wanted to also say, as part of our submittal packages on past projects, we've always provided a watershed drawing, part of our engineering, which would show how the water is being diverted to the back of the property or wherever the property detention is. So that is something that we normally provide as well.
well,
And that would be additional information that would could be submitted as part of the petition that would show how the property would operate, that would mitigate impacts to surrounding properties on the opposite side of Route 14.
But my question is, Why not do the study? That's what I don't understand. Instead of having a business write a statement, why not have somebody that is a licensed professional do the study, is my whole concern.
What's the cost?
And how much does the impact study cost environmental?
And, yeah, and why is that, I mean, it's such a great way of just kind of calming everybody instead of just a statement from a business who has no, impact on the whole. They're not biologists, they're not, it's just that's just my.
Why don't we do this? Why don't I amend that? I need somebody to amend the motion to remove the environmental impact studies. And let's.
Can I ask a quick question, Brian?
Sure.
Yes,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Say yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Did the neighboring property do an environmental study next door?
Thornton's?
No, an environmental study was not required for that project going forward. It was developed prior to our current PUD requirements. This was a new requirement that was added in our code last year.
This is, can I add a comment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with both of the residents that came up. I do not feel comfortable approving this waiver of I'm okay with the utilities improvement, but I'm not okay with the open house resident meeting and the environmental impact studies either.
Well, just so there's clarification, there will be a public hearing and notification to the neighbors for the ZPA. This was just to eliminate for a preliminary hearing, just so you're aware.
I know, I heard all that, and I still would like to see those two things still be required.
Mr. Euler, any comments or question or guidance on this, please?
Well, these are discretionary waiver requests. The board has the ability to require any of these or none of these, depending on the information that you're being presented with. You did indicate that the point of our zoning and plan commission meetings, public hearings, is to allow full public input and participation in a submittal like this. So the plan commission has the ability, they do not have to send this on to the board until they feel it is fully vetted, meaning if there are individuals that come to the public hearing before the plan commission has the option to continue that public hearing as long as they feel they need additional information presented to the plan commission and made available to the public. So there is that process in place already relative to public input, but again, the issues regarding waiving any of the application requirements are discretionary for the board.
Okay.
All right, Scott, just a quick follow-up question on that too. So our environmental impact study, Brian had mentioned earlier that the environmental impact study as required by law. So I don't know what, with this site just being a previous industrial site that has green grass sitting on it, what requirements there would be by law to do an environmental impact study on the property?
Only if there were soils being disturbed, underground tanks releasing chemicals off the property. As Brian indicated, if there's a watershed that carries water off the property that could be contaminated in some fashion by the use being proposed, there are no legal requirements for an environmental study per se just because you're developing the property. There would have to be some potential use of the property that contravenes either Illinois Environmental Protection Act requirements or the federal act. As Brian has described the project, there don't appear to be any of those issues, or a wetland, I should say, any of those issues implicated here, unless there's a suggestion that there's a potential violation of either the Illinois EPA or the federal EPA.
So that's what I'm trying to understand and trying to put everything together, is that we have a board that I've heard from some board members that are interested in requiring that. But then if we reflect back on our ordinance, it says as required by law, and I'm not sure that's going to be triggered at all. So it's, what would we be asking the petitioner to do? What kind of study? And I don't know if I see that right now.
That's exactly where I'm at with it. I understand, and I 100% understand the concerns that have been raised here today. And because it's long-term, it's a long-term picture to look at it and say, hey, how is this going to impact? Once it's here, so we want to make sure it's okay. But in listening here, and that's why I was saying I'm getting a little confused going back and forth here, it doesn't sound to me that based on our UDO that we have the ability to require this. If it's not required by law, we can't just say to someone, hey, just because we want you to do it. As a business coming to our town, they look at what the requirements are, and if it's not a requirement, I don't see how we can force someone to do that. On the flip side, I think what we're saying is we need to make sure for any of us at a board level, or I can speak for myself, but I'm hearing it from others that I think that are in agreement, we want to make sure that there are certain things that are going to be protected when this comes in and that we have enough information in order to make a well-informed decision. But these are two separate issues to me. Right now, we're just saying, hey, can we move it forward? And I'm looking at it and saying, I hear what Trustee Cabelli mentioned about the open house resident meeting, but there is going to be opportunities for that. So they have plenty of opportunities to come. I don't know why we have to make a business do a separate one if we're going to have a hearing already with the ZPA. So I'm fine with removing these. The only one I was having trouble with was the environmental impact study. But what I'm hearing from our attorney is that there's nothing that requires them to do it by law. So how is it responsible of us to force a business coming to our town to do that?
Well, we can always be more restrictive, what we feel is better for the village.
Okay.
I'd like to, as trustees Weinhammer or Kraus, do you have any comments regarding this?
I do. This is Trustee Kraus. Before I came to the meeting, I had some of the same concerns that the residents brought up about the open house and the resident meeting. I do look at the subdivision behind there, Cherry Street. It's up on the hill. I think there will be issues with the sound with them. And then the environmental impact study, I'd like to see that done also.
Trustee Weinhammer?
Hi, this is Jennifer.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I did speak to Jake about this earlier, and he did say that we were going to have an open house, but on the meeting packet, it said that there was not going to be an open house, so I was just kind of confused about that.
There would be an open house part of the zoning process.
It would be a public hearing.
Yeah. It wouldn't be like, an open house would be just getting people together and saying, this is what's going to happen. The zoning is more formal. There's more articulation, and there's more documents that need to be provided so that the residents would get a good understanding during that time. The surrounding residents would be notified prior to this meeting, so therefore, we are really satisfying that open house meeting. So this would be a different situation if we were doing this in a highly dense, populated residential area. That would be something I think that this board would not approve. But I am comfortable with removing the environmental impact studies for this and getting a little bit more in depth than that. I'm okay with satisfying the open house and resident meeting to the ZPA and let the ZPA flush these things out, and they're pretty good at that. So I'd kind of like to see where Trustee Betts is on this.
Well, I think that we got tripped up when we voted on Thornton's. We were talking about all this also, all these different requirements that we have to do. But in the future, yes, prior to, we will have to have an open house, and we will need to, look at where the water is flowing and things like that. So I am fine with having these items taken off or waived.
The open house and environmental.
Yes.
Dale, Mr. Trustee Collier.
Yeah, so we're not going to call it an environmental impact study, maybe. I know we're going to call it something else, but it still has to be brought forward on what's going to actually happen to the environment and what could. Maybe this isn't required by law, but do we have the power to call it something else and require something else of them besides calling it impact study?
You're absolutely right. The board obviously can ask for additional information in support of the petition. I mean, it's going to go through the zoning process, and the zoning board will vet it, and then they'll bring back that information to the village board. You can ask those questions certainly during that process here.
Right. So that's where I'm at with it too, is that I can say unequivocally, if it came back here and nothing happened and nothing was addressed, I would not be comfortable because I don't have enough information. So we need some more information. But I don't think that we're going to get that information by an environmental impact study. That I think we need to get in another manner. As Trustee Collier was saying, I think that we need to require, the petitioners understand that we're not going to just say, hey, okay, we need to make sure that there's not going to be hazardous chemicals going into the possibility of the watershed going into an ecosystem over at the Miller's property, having any negative impact there. But I think that that's going to happen throughout this process. I think this is just the start. This isn't the finish. I don't look at this as being fast tracked. There's a lot of steps that they need to go through still.
But what I'm concerned is then why is this part of the conditions? Why is item D, copies of any environmental impact study, why is that in here? Why are they asking to waive it if it's not something that you guys can enforce? That's what I don't understand in this letter. It's asking for waivers of certain conditions. So if they're asking for waivers of certain conditions, what is this why is it even a condition that has to be done is my concern. So if it's in here, how would you guys carry that out? Or, what exactly are you asking in the ordinances that are already put in place?
Brian Simmons, do you want to handle that question, please?
Certainly. So the application process, the requirements that are established there, like as mentioned, the language that's in the code is environmental impact studies as required by law. So as our attorney mentioned, there are certain circumstances where those studies would be required if there's a watershed on the property or other sort of development that had occurred on the property in the past that required additional remediation would trigger those types of studies. In this particular case, those triggers are not in place, so that a study would not be required for this type of project. However, based on the discussion from the board there and the comments that were made this evening, I understand there are still concerns as far as the type of use, and there would be ways that the petitioner could potentially address that through the zoning process to provide additional documentation of that. It won't necessarily be potentially a full impact study, but they can provide additional documentation to how their business would operate and would mitigate any negative impacts on surrounding land uses.
So the way I'm interpreting this is if we remove the environmental impact studies from this, and in order for them to proceed to the zoning, they'd have to provide some sort of environmental study. Some engineer would have to evaluate the situation.
Yeah, I would recommend that based off the discussion this evening, I would recommend that the petitioner provide some additional documentation, narrative or whatnot that would describe how the site would operate and how it would be physically designed in a way to protect the amenities that exist on the property and surrounding properties as well. But that would be additional documentation that could be provided as part of this middle. The petitioner already mentioned they do have some of the information already prepared. That could be submitted for additional review throughout the zoning process.
Right.
So final statement is, you're saying they are going to present an environmental impact study and how it would impact the neighboring properties, our property in particular?
Let me go to the petitioner. Dan, you're hearing a lot of this conversation with regards to the concerns that the adjoining property owners have. Is this something that you can have taken care of?
I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't get the last part.
You've heard the commentary from the board members as well as the potential future neighbors with a very delicate ecosystem, Lake Julian Trout Farm over there. We're thinking about having you do some sort of an impact study, an environmental impact study. Is that something that you're capable of handling before the zoning board. In order to go through the zoning, we would require you to have some sort of a environmental study performed on the property.
I don't know what type of environmental study I would do. I mean, I'm purchasing a lot that somebody else has already cleaned and did all the demolition. I mean, an environmental study, if I'm not mistaken, I've never done one, never needed to. Isn't it typically like if there was underground storage tanks where something leaked? I mean, I'm a biodegradable business. I'm not a gas station, so I'm not going to affect the waterway. So I don't even know how to, or even where to call to get something like that.
I think
I have all the data that I can provide on the chemicals that we use for our facility. I have all the engineering drawings that when we go to the planning and zoning meetings that would show how the water is shed, and I would have all the engineering drawings shown for the detention and how everything is pitched away from Route 14 to the back of the property for rainwater. That's strictly rainwater. My facility, again, don't have anything on the outside of my building that would pertain to any type of a chemical. So I'm trying to just figure out what impact I would even make by getting an impact study.
And I think that's what the board is looking for, is just additional information.
Right.
Additional information related to the business, additional information related to the property. We haven't obviously seen that because this is the first step in the process. More details will be fleshed out through the zoning board process, and certainly it is in the petitioner's best interest to provide additional detail here for the zoning board and the village board's future review.
I agree.
Could I get a copy of the chemicals you want to use?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And
We'll
I
make sure
just
that
want
you-
everybody to be as much involved, as much input as they can to it. That's why I'm looking for you guys to get as much information you can on your own before it comes back second time around. I'm just looking for transparency and you guys be as well informed as you could be also. That, you know, potential environmental problems kind of, you know, you never know what happens. And like I said,
I agree.
you know,
I hope that you know that from the last time, we are very conscious about that, and I think that this board will be very diligent with that.
Okay, Village Board, we have a motion on the table, and we've had a couple of conflicting comments regarding some of the waivers on here. Would the board, majority of the board be in favor of just removing the environmental impact studies, and that the petitioner would have to bring all the environmental things and that he would have at his avail to the ZPA, as well as a list of chemicals and things that he will be using in the process?
No, I'm not in favor of that. I think it needs to go with these things removed. As the petitioner said, there is no environmental impact study for him to do. So what are we asking a business to do? As he said, he's buying a piece of property that has already been cleaned. He sees no impact. What are we asking him to pay for to do? That just does not make sense to me. That's an undue burden to put on a new business. I think that he has to get us the information, and we need it when it goes to the ZPA, but it's not technically an environmental impact study.
Correct.
Right, correct.
Right.
I'm
So
looking
it-
for what impact it would have on the environment, not
I
existing
understand.
conditions, his future condition. what
I
it do to it.
understand, but
Yeah.
that's not an environmental impact study is all I'm saying.
Right.
I agree. Before, I mean, I think he's hearing us loud and clear. Are you willing to bet that the petitioner, that Dan is saying, I hear what you're saying, I'm going to get to the information that you need, but it's not quote unquote an environmental impact study. There's no reason to put that undue burden and cost on a business looking to come to our town.
Right.
So I want to vote on it as it stands.
Likewise. And that's what we had last time too with Thornton's.
Okay. And I will not hear any amendments here. So we'll go right to roll call, please.
Kraus,
No.
McAlpine,
Yes.
Weinhammer,
Mark, and I'm having a really tough time understanding sometimes when the people on the board are speaking. I can hear people who are calling in clearly. Can you please re-explain to me what exactly you guys are voting on?
We're voting on the motion as it appears in your packet, without withdrawing the waivers. So that they would be granted a waiver for the open house, off-site utility improvement, traffic study, economic analysis study, and environmental impact studies. All this information will be taken up at the ZPA. The petitioner will be providing documentation about the products he uses and how it's going to impact the future use of the property. Because the property has been cleaned, he's buying a piece of property that has already been restored and brought to a saleable state.
So are we going to be doing what the people who are there who are concerned, I'm sorry, I'm having difficult understanding everybody that has a microphone in front of them right now, but are we going to be doing what they're asking us to do as far as the impact study or the environmental study?
Well, it's not going to be an official impact study because there's nothing to study. So what they're going to do is going to provide all the environmental
Additional evidence.
additional environmental, the products that they're going to use and how it's going to be affecting the property moving it forward. So I think that satisfies that requirement. With regard to the open house that was brought up by Trustee Kraus and Cavelli, there will be public hearings through the ZPA. The residents surrounding the property will be notified of the potential project. So they will have an opportunity to speak to the ZPA as well as staff and the petitioner. So that takes care of that situation. There's no need for a traffic study and there's no need for an economic analysis study. So we're voting on the way it's been presented.
Okay, at this time I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Betts,
Yes.
Collier.
One more statement.
Yeah.
So we're going through this, and last time when Mr. Miller was here, is the concern is a 100-year flood, something happens, this product that they're using at the new car wash they want to put in washes into his trout ponds, is it going to kill the fish?
Correct.
Those are the answers we need. We are not going to get that from an environmental impact study, but going forward, the ZPA, we will get those answers.
Correct.
So I will vote yes.
Cavelli.
No.
That's it. Motion passes. Mayor Condon.
Yes.
Sorry.
We will flush all these things out at the ZPA. We will work
we
with
will.
the,
I promise you, we will.
pardon me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Flush it through, flush it through.
The other way.
Thank you.
Sorry about that, Mayor.
Thank you, guys.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Moving forward, administrator's report.
Mayor, Village Board, I just wanted to update the public here. Unfortunately, it's with great sadness. We have a few cancellations of events within the community. So just for the public's benefit, there will be no Memorial Day parade this year that has been canceled due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, the Trojan Track Field and Cross Country Association has canceled their 5K and 10K race that was scheduled on June 20th. And also, unfortunately, Carrie Cruise Night, the very popular event, has been canceled this year as well. But all these events look to come back next year. So thank you.
Thank you, Jake. Brian Simmons, anything for us?
No additional update, Mayor.
Thank you. Eric Morimoto?
Yes, Mayor, thank you. Just a reminder from Public Works, spring cleanup, which we're gonna affectionately rename summer cleanup, has been rescheduled. It's been on our website and some of our outreach, but just a reminder, the south half of town, so south of Route 14, your summer cleanup day is Saturday, June 13th. And for those that live north of Route 14, your day will be Saturday, June 20th. Parameters of that program are consistent with previous years, so please see the website for additional information and details on what is allowed to be in place for Flood Brothers to pick up on those days. In addition, we're also announcing that with our adjusted operations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the spring brush collection will be canceled this year. However, we are encouraging residents to utilize the Flood Brothers Yard Waste Pickup Program for your brush. So as in past years, you can put unlimited amounts of brush as long as it's bundled and in the 4-foot lengths as outlined on the website. So please take advantage of that. And we apologize that we're unable to offer that program for this year, but we are focusing ourselves on those essential and core services. So appreciate everybody's patience, but it does make a big difference in our adjusted operations to maintain that drinking water production, wastewater treatment, and other safety and essential services. So thanks again.
Thank you. Chief Finland's not around, so
He's upstairs.
he's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any future agenda items and discussion by the village board? Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There are no opposed. We will reconvene in just a couple of minutes. Thank you.